In an alternate timeline, the year is 2023, yet it feels as if time has been in a relentless loop. A century has passed since the fateful shots rang out in Sarajevo that sparked the conflict that would become World War I, and incredibly, the war is still ongoing. Following the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria in 1914, the countries of Europe had flared into a war the likes of which the world had never seen before. The Central Powers Germany, Austria-Hungary, the Ottoman Empire, and Bulgaria squared off against the Allies France, the United Kingdom, Russia, Italy, Japan, and later the United States. The expected quick resolution became a years-long stalemate of trench warfare, with no side making significant progress. As the years turned into decades, the alliances began to shift. Russia, beset by its own revolution, withdrew from the conflict early on, leaving the Eastern Front silent but guarded. The Ottoman Empire collapsed in on itself, and the Middle East descended into a series of smaller but no less bitter wars for control and independence. The war had its ebbs and flows, moments where peace seemed on the horizon, only to be dashed away by a new innovation, a new strategy, or a new alliance. The United States tried several times to broker a peace agreement but to no avail. The technological advances spurred by the war were astronomical, and with each leap forward came a new wave of destruction. Airplanes, originally used for reconnaissance, became lethal weapons of war. Tanks, initially slow and cumbersome, evolved into fast, armored behemoths that tore through the entrenched lines. Chemical warfare, once a nightmarish novelty, became a constant, pervasive threat. And the world changed. Borders shifted, nations rose and fell, ideologies came and went, yet the war raged on, an unending symphony of gunfire and artillery. The Central Powers, the Allies, these terms became meaningless. There were just those at war and those waiting to be drawn into it. In 2023, Europe was a scarred, war-ravaged landscape. Cities were unrecognizable, populations were decimated, and the trenches crisscrossing the land served as scars of a century-long conflict. But despite the desperate situation, life continued. People found ways to survive, to find joy, to hope amid the devastation. In the northern part of what once was France, a young woman named Adele navigated the treacherous no-man's land. Born into this world of ceaseless conflict, Adele, like many of her generation, had learned to adapt. She became a courier, tasked with carrying messages between the various factions. It was dangerous work, but it provided her with a sense of purpose, a way to fight back against the war that had stolen so much. In the heart of the former German Empire, a mechanic named Karl worked tirelessly on the war machines. He was an expert at transforming the piles of scrap and outdated tech into functioning tanks or aircraft. His skill was invaluable in a world where every resource counted. He was a cog in the war machine but hoped that his contributions might lead to an end, not a continuation of the conflict. A world away in the United States, a senator named Emily Foster tirelessly lobbied for a renewed push for peace. She was a beacon of hope for many, a voice of reason amid the cries for further conflict. Emily had a vision of a united world, a place where diplomacy triumphed over destruction. But her journey was uphill, her opponents many. Yet she pressed on, unwavering in her mission. These individuals and countless others were intertwined in the fabric of this unending war. Their actions, their hopes, and their dreams formed the narrative of a world in conflict. They fought, loved, and lived against the backdrop of war, each contributing to a story that seemed destined to go on forever. But change was coming. In the East, whispers of a rising power grew louder. In the West, murmurs of revolutionary weapons capable of ending the war were getting harder to ignore. In the midst of all this, the protagonists of our tale found themselves on a collision course with destiny. Their actions and choices would shape the future of this war-torn world. And as 2023 turned into 2024, the question on everyone's mind was the same: when, if ever, would this war end? Would it take another century of fighting, or was there still hope for a resolution that could bring about a lasting peace? These questions lingered in the smoke-filled air, unanswered but ever-present, much like the war itself. As 2024 dawned, the whispers from the East grew louder. There was a nation rising from the ashes of the former Russian Empire, a federation of United States stretching from the Urals to the Pacific. They called themselves the Eurasian Collective, and they were steadily growing in strength and influence. Some believed they held the key to the war's end. Meanwhile, in the West, rumors about a revolutionary weapon being developed by the United States became harder to ignore. In the depths of a highly secured, secret facility, top scientists were rumored to be working on a project that could bring about the end of the war. Yet, whispers of this weapon also carried a sense of dread. What kind of a weapon could end a century-long war? And at what cost? Adele, the courier, began hearing these rumors during her perilous travels through the shattered landscapes of Europe. Among the soldiers and civilians alike, there was a glimmer of hope, a belief that perhaps an end was finally in sight. Yet, amid the optimism, there was also fear. The horror of a weapon that could end the war was as terrifying as the war itself. In the heartland of the former German Empire, Karl worked even harder to build machines capable of defending against this unknown threat. The rumors of the American weapon had reached him as well, and there was an air of desperation now. Yet, within him, there was also a sense of determination. If his work could prevent more loss, he would continue, driven by an unyielding desire for peace. Half a world away, in the United States, Emily Foster worked tirelessly in the Senate to forge a consensus for peace. The news of the rising Eurasian Collective and the secret American weapon had given her a new argument to persuade her peers. This was an opportunity for diplomacy, for negotiations, for a world free from the constant war. Emily, undeterred by setbacks, pushed on, fueled by an unwavering belief in peace. In the Eurasian Collective, a former soldier named Ivan had become an influential figure. He had fought in the trenches on the Eastern Front and knew the horror of war firsthand. Ivan believed in the power of unity, in the strength of nations working together. He sought to rally the collective not for war, but for peace. To many, Ivan was a beacon of hope, a leader who could bring about change. Months turned into seasons, and 2024 slowly marched towards 2025. The Eurasian Collective continued to grow, the rumors of the American weapon became more concerning, and the world held its breath. In this tense atmosphere, Adele, Karl, Emily, and Ivan found their roles increasingly significant, their actions having greater consequences. Adele's messages now carried news of diplomatic meetings and peace talks. Karl's machines were no longer just for war but also for rebuilding the war-torn cities. Emily's diplomatic efforts led to an unprecedented peace summit, and Ivan's influence began to stretch beyond the borders of the Eurasian Collective. As 2025 dawned, it seemed that the world was on the brink of something monumental. Change was in the air, and the hope for peace was more potent than ever. Yet, uncertainty hung heavy over the world, and the question remained, would the relentless gears of war finally grind to a halt, or would the cycle of destruction continue? The stage was set, the players were ready, and the world held its breath. Only time would tell the fate of this century-long conflict, and the world waited in anxious anticipation for the dawn of a new era. Would it be an era of peace or another century of war? The answer laid within the hearts and hands of those brave enough to dream of a world without war. In the rising Eurasian Collective, Ivan, the influential leader and former soldier, rallied his people. He was adamant that peace was the only way forward. With each impassioned speech he gave, he swayed more and more of the collective to his cause. Word of his rallying cries echoed across continents, reaching the ears of Emily Foster in America. Emily, inspired by Ivan's push for peace, amplified her own efforts. She urged her fellow senators to negotiate, not fight, with this emerging power. And as the word of the mysterious American weapon continued to spread, Emily used it as a catalyst for peace talks rather than war. Her persuasive speeches and unwavering conviction slowly began to change minds. And for the first time in decades, peace seemed not just a dream but a tangible possibility. Across the Atlantic, Karl the mechanic heard of these developments with mixed feelings. Peace was a notion that seemed too good to be true, and yet he couldn't deny the spark of hope that ignited within him. He wondered what his role would be in a world without war. Would he be fixing machines for construction rather than destruction? The thought warmed him, and he continued his work with renewed vigor. The courier, Adele, found herself in the unique position of carrying the hopes of nations in her satchel. Her messages now not only contained military orders, but also terms of negotiations and treaties. Each step she took across the war-ravaged lands felt like a step toward a better future. Every successful delivery was a potential lifesaver, a potential game-changer. And so, the first half of 2025 passed, marked by heated debates, secret meetings, and cautious optimism. However, the presence of the rumored American weapon always loomed in the background, a sinister reminder of the potential for destruction. But as summer turned to autumn, a breakthrough came. The United States, influenced by Emily's tireless efforts, proposed a peace summit with the Eurasian Collective. The world watched with bated breath as leaders from both sides met in a neutral location, the ruins of Geneva. Emily represented the United States, while Yvonne spoke for the Eurasian Collective. It was a meeting that would decide the fate of the world. They spoke with conviction, compassion, and a shared understanding of the horrors of the unending war. They each put forth arguments, not for victory, but for peace. The goal was clear: end the war without using the dreaded American weapon. Meanwhile, Adele was entrusted with the delivery of the final draft of the peace treaty to all remaining factions in Europe. It was the most important delivery of her life, and she traversed the shattered lands with a renewed sense of purpose. At the same time, Karl put his skills to use for peace. He was tasked with dismantling deactivated war machines, repurposing them for reconstruction efforts. For the first time in his life, he was building, not destroying. The months of negotiations stretched on, and the world stood still, waiting for the outcome. As the year 2025 drew to a close, the leaders finally emerged from their talks with a signed peace treaty. It was a moment that had seemed impossible. After a century-long conflict, the Great War was finally over. As news of the peace treaty spread, celebrations erupted worldwide. For the first time in generations, children were born into a world at peace. Karl used his skills to build homes instead of war machines, Adele carried messages of unity and reconstruction, Emily worked towards maintaining peace, and Yvonne led his nation into a new era. But peace is a delicate thing, a candle flickering in the wind, and the threat of the American weapon still loomed. Though the war was over, the path to a lasting peace was just beginning. It was a road that would require diligence, compassion, and constant vigilance. Yet, for the moment, the world rejoiced. The cycle of destruction had been broken, and though the scars of the century-long war would never fully heal, there was hope for a brighter future. As the year 2026 dawned, it was not as another year of war, but as the first year of a hard-won peace. The work was not over, but for the first time in a century, the world looked forward with hope, not fear. As 2026 unfurled like a bright tapestry, nations began to rebuild. The world was war-weary, yet filled with a new sense of purpose. The cities and landscapes bore the scars of the century-long war, but now those wounds had a chance to heal. In the Eurasian Collective, Yvonne led the process of rebuilding and reconciliation. His wartime experience had taught him the importance of unity and mutual respect, and these were the principles he used to guide the collective towards a prosperous future. With each passing day, the Eurasian Collective grew stronger, emerging as a beacon of hope in a world scarred by conflict. In the United States, Emily Foster now faced a different kind of battle. She championed the cause of disarmament, advocating for the dismantling of the ominous weapon that had threatened to plunge the world into even deeper chaos. The secret weapon had been a terrifying bargaining chip during the peace talks, and now, with the war over, Emily believed it was time to dismantle it, to make a statement to the world that peace would prevail over destruction. Across the Atlantic, Karl was at the forefront of reconstruction efforts. His skills, which had once been used to craft weapons of war, were now being used to rebuild. He worked tirelessly, transforming scrap metal and salvaged materials into homes and infrastructure. The sight of buildings rising where only ruins had stood filled him with a sense of achievement he'd never felt during the war years. Adele, the courier, found her role had changed drastically. Instead of weaving through battlefields and trenches, she now traversed towns and cities in the process of rebuilding. Her deliveries no longer contained battle strategies or peace treaties, but plans for new infrastructure and messages of hope and unity. The world was at peace, yet the path to maintain it was fraught with obstacles. Old grudges and rivalries threatened to resurface, and the imbalance of power was a constant concern. But the collective memory of the horrors of war served as a deterrent, a stark reminder of the destructive path they had finally deviated from. And so, the year passed, marked by significant progress. Cities were being rebuilt, nations were flourishing, and the children of this era knew only stories of war rather than its grim reality. It was a time of change, of renewal, and of hope. As 2026 turned into 2027, the world celebrated not just a new year but also the anniversary of a year without war. The events of the previous year had proved that peace was not only possible, but it was also the only way forward. Emily, Yvonne, Adele, and Carl, each of them continued to play their part in this era of peace. Their lives were a testament to the human spirit's resilience, proof that even in the face of a century-long conflict, hope could endure. But as they moved forward, they knew they carried the weight of history with them. They knew that peace was a delicate, ongoing process, one that required constant work and vigilance. The century-long war had taught the world a harsh lesson, and now, they were determined not to forget it. The path ahead was not easy, but they walked it nonetheless, driven by the hope of a better future. As they looked to the horizon, they saw a world transformed. The war-ravaged landscapes of the past were giving way to bustling cities and thriving communities. The world was moving forward, healing from its wounds. And as it healed, it remembered, vowing never to return to the cycle of destruction that had marked the past century. This was their world now, a world that had known war for too long and now yearned for peace. It was a world rebuilding, a world relearning, a world reimagining what it could be. And it was a world that, for the first time in a century, dared to dream of a future free from the shadows of war. As 2027 unfolded, the world continued to change. In the Eurasian Collective, Yvonne worked tirelessly to create a new standard for governance. The collective sought balance and equality among its states, aiming to dismantle the hierarchies that had once fueled conflict. He focused on education, realizing that the peace they'd so hard won could only be preserved through the knowledge and understanding of the future generations. Meanwhile, across the ocean, Emily Foster was met with success. The United States agreed to dismantle the weapon that had cast a shadow over peace negotiations. Its disassembly was broadcast worldwide, a symbol of the commitment to peace. Emily didn't stop there. She advocated for an international disarmament pact, a collective agreement that would prevent any country from wielding such power again. Her efforts were met with resistance but also with surprising amounts of support. The world had seen the edge of annihilation and had pulled back, and no one was eager to return to that precipice. Carl, the mechanic turned architect of a new world, saw his home transform. From the ruins of old came the sprouts of a new society. Schools, homes, hospitals, life was returning to the ghost towns of war. Carl found satisfaction in this work, seeing children playing in areas that had once been no man's land. The land bore the scars of war, but now it also held the promise of the future. For Adele, her work as a courier had evolved. Now, she carried blueprints, new laws, educational materials. Each of her deliveries contributing to the growing peace. But Adele wasn't content with just that. She started working on a network of couriers, connecting the farthest corners of the world. Knowledge, she realized, was the lifeblood of peace, and she was determined to keep it flowing. The world had started to blossom in ways it hadn't for a century. Music, arts, and culture began to thrive once more. People were not just surviving, they were living. They were learning about each other, understanding that their differences were not threats but aspects to be celebrated. Festivals replaced rallies, concerts replaced parades, and for the first time in a century, the world danced. However, not everything was smooth sailing. Disputes over resources and old rivalries threatened the delicate peace. Yet the unified global commitment to avoid returning to war was stronger. Every dispute was a chance to learn, to improve international laws, and refine conflict resolution methods. The world had seen the consequences of resorting to war and was determined to find a better way. Years turned into a decade, and the world had changed. The year 2030 marked the 5th anniversary of the end of the century-long war. It was a testament to humanity's resilience and a reminder of the horrors they had left behind. It was a day of remembrance and a celebration of peace. Emily, Yvonne, Carl, and Adele, along with millions of others, had been the architects of this new world. They had played their parts in steering the course of history away from perpetual war and towards lasting peace. They had turned the page, starting a new chapter for humanity. The world was far from perfect. There were still disagreements, still injustices. But for the first time in a long time, the world was united, not in conflict, but in the collective pursuit of peace. The road ahead was long, and many challenges lay ahead, but with each passing day, the echoes of war grew fainter. The world had learned from its past, had risen from its ashes, and was moving towards a future it was actively creating. A future where disputes were solved with words, not weapons. A future where the next generation could grow without fear of war. A future that was built on the hope of those who dared to dream of a world without war. This was their legacy, a testament to the enduring human spirit, capable of both immense destruction and incredible resilience. And as the sun set on another day of peace, they knew they were part of something greater, a turning point in the annals of human history. Just as the world began to settle into a rhythm of peace, new challenges arose in 2031. The newfound unity was put to the test as tensions sparked between two of the most influential entities, the United States and the Eurasian Collective. It started subtly, with disagreements over resource allocation. The world had begun a major shift towards sustainable energy, but control over these resources was unevenly distributed. The Eurasian Collective, rich in resources, was reluctant to relinquish too much control, citing the need to develop its own infrastructure. The United States, on the other hand, called for an equal distribution, arguing it was essential for maintaining global balance. Emily Foster, now a senior figure in the American government, was at the heart of this escalating situation. She believed in cooperation and mutual benefit, but she also knew she had to protect her nation's interests. She pushed for negotiations, hoping to avoid the kind of conflict that had once led the world to war. At the same time, Ivan found himself torn between his people's needs and the growing international pressure. The Eurasian Collective had made immense strides under his leadership, and he was loath to risk their progress. Yet, he understood the importance of global harmony and the dangerous path this disagreement could lead them down. Meanwhile, Adele found herself busier than ever. Messages flew back and forth as the tension escalated, each one more urgent than the last. She became an essential link in this fragile situation, delivering proposals, counter-proposals, and pleas for compromise. Karl watched the growing political storm with concern. His hands, once used to create weapons of war, had been building the foundations of peace for years. He couldn't bear the thought of that peace being threatened. He became a vocal advocate for negotiation and compromise, using his influence to rally for a peaceful resolution. As the months wore on, the tensions worsened. Public sentiment became polarized, old fears resurfaced, and the ghost of the past threatened to undo the progress they had made. Yet, even in this, there was a crucial difference from the world of a century ago. The governments openly communicated, the public was kept informed, and every effort was made to reach a peaceful resolution. By late 2031, a series of intense negotiations began. Emily and Ivan, representing their respective nations, came face to face once more. Only this time, they weren't negotiating peace but trying to prevent a new conflict. The negotiations were grueling. Neither side wanted to give up more than they could afford, but they also understood the cost of failure. The world watched with bated breath as these discussions went on, the memories of the past war looming like specters. After months of negotiations, a breakthrough finally came. The United States and the Eurasian Collective reached a historic agreement on resource distribution. It was a compromise, with both sides giving and taking. It was not a perfect solution, but it was a peaceful one. This successful negotiation marked a significant milestone in this new era. It showed that even major disputes could be resolved peacefully, and served as a blueprint for resolving future conflicts. The drama had been intense, the risk high, but they had emerged on the other side without resorting to violence. The world sighed in relief and took one more collective step away from its violent past and towards a future of peace. As the dust settled from the resource distribution crisis, a new challenge loomed. A rising political faction in the United States, led by charismatic and fiery Senator Mason Black, began questioning the nation's approach to global relationships. His faction believed in prioritizing national interests above all else, adopting a more isolationist policy. Black's rhetoric struck a chord with those who felt the U.S. had given too much away in the recent resource negotiation. His popularity soared, and the internal balance of the U.S. government began to shift. Emily Foster watched this development with increasing concern. She understood the appeal of Black's words in the face of recent events, but she feared the consequences of this inward turn. She believed in the importance of international cooperation and saw Black's isolationist ideas as a dangerous step backward. Emily began a campaign to counter this rising tide, emphasizing the benefits of their international relationships and the dangers of isolation. Halfway across the world, Yvonne watched the growing political divide in the United States with unease. The recent resource negotiation had been a victory for peace, but if the U.S. took a turn towards isolationism, it could undermine all their progress. He started back-channel discussions with Emily, strategizing ways to stabilize the situation without causing additional political friction. Meanwhile, Carl and Adele faced their own set of challenges. As news of the rising faction in the U.S. reached the people, it sparked concern and even fear. Carl found himself trying to maintain morale, reminding people of their collective commitment to peace, even as uncertainty loomed. Adele, on the other hand, was tasked with delivering an increasingly complex web of messages and counter-messages as nations sought to understand and react to the shifts in the U.S. political landscape. Despite their efforts, Mason Black's faction gained momentum, propelling him into a position of influence in the U.S. government. His first act was to propose legislation that would significantly limit the U.S.'s involvement in international treaties and pacts. This move caused shockwaves around the globe, sparking fear of a new era of fragmentation and conflict. Emily, facing the most challenging situation of her political career, refused to back down. She rallied those in the government who still believed in international cooperation, launching a passionate defense against Black's proposal. At the same time, Yvonne managed to gather international support, trying to exert diplomatic pressure to dissuade the U.S. government from adopting Black's policies. It was a tense time, a test of the resilience of the peace they had built. Would the world fall back into division and conflict, or would it stand strong, united in its commitment to peace? In a dramatic climax, Emily challenged Black to a public debate. A chance to lay out their visions for the country and let the people decide. The world held its breath as the debate unfolded, a war of words that could shape the course of global history. Emily spoke with passion and conviction, painting a picture of a world united, prosperous, and at peace. Black, charismatic as ever, argued for the strength in self-reliance, in a country unburdened by global obligations. In the end, it was a closely fought battle. But Emily's message of unity, hope, and the stark reminder of the century-long war tipped the scales. The majority of the U.S. citizens, and hence, the government, chose to reject isolationism. Mason Black's proposal was defeated, and the world let out a collective sigh of relief. But the incident served as a reminder of the fragility of their newfound peace. It underlined the importance of vigilance and the continuous effort required to maintain global harmony. The world had weathered yet another storm, the ties of peace had held strong, but they knew there would be more challenges ahead. As they moved forward, they did so with the understanding that the fight for peace was ongoing and that every decision, every action mattered. With this knowledge, they continued to tread the path of peace, a path illuminated by the lessons of their past and the hope for a better future. As the world navigated past the crisis in the United States, another storm was brewing. In the heart of Africa, a region long overshadowed by the dominance of the US and Eurasia, a new power was on the rise. The Pan-African Alliance, PA, an association of multiple African nations, had been quietly and steadily growing in strength and influence. Under the leadership of charismatic and determined leader Nia Kipruto, the PA had managed to harness Africa's vast resources, developing cutting-edge technologies and raising living standards. However, the PA's rise was not welcomed by all. As the alliance began asserting itself on the global stage, demanding a more prominent voice and a larger share of resources, it sparked tension, particularly with the Eurasian Collective and the United States. What had started as a peaceful rise quickly became a source of global contention, threatening to disrupt the tenuous balance of power. Emily Foster, fresh from her battle with Mason Black, found herself facing another complex challenge. She saw the need for the PA to have a significant role in global governance, but also recognized that this shift could cause resentment and potentially escalate into conflict. On the other side, Ivan understood that the Eurasian Collective had to adapt to this new world power, but he had to manage the anxieties of his own people who feared a loss of influence and security. In the heart of the PA, Nia Kiprito was resolute. She felt the time for her continent had come. Africa had been sidelined for too long, and she was determined to change that. Yet, she too was conscious of the delicate balance she had to maintain. She needed to assert the PA's rightful place without pushing the world into a conflict. Karl and Adele found their roles evolving in these changing dynamics. Karl was consulted for his expertise on sustainable infrastructure as the PA sought to expand its cities and industries responsibly. Adele, on the other hand, found her network extending into Africa, carrying messages between the PA, the US, and the Eurasian Collective. As the years passed, the PA's influence continued to grow, creating a three-way power dynamic that the world had never seen before. This led to ongoing disputes over resource control, technological developments, and political influence. There were moments of tension, crises that seemed to teeter on the brink of conflict. Yet, each was resolved through negotiation and compromise. The world had learned its lessons from the Great War, and even as disagreements persisted, the commitment to avoid violent conflict remained. Despite these repeated tensions, there were also periods of cooperation. Joint projects were undertaken, cultural exchanges took place, and there were even moments of global unity. It was an intricate dance of power, a constant balancing act, but one that never quite tipped into war. And so, this became the state of the world. A world where the United States, Eurasian Collective, and the Pan-African Alliance were locked in an unending cycle of rivalry and cooperation. A world where peace was maintained, not by the absence of conflict, but by the continuous effort to manage it and prevent it from escalating into war. This new equilibrium was far from perfect, but it marked an evolution in global dynamics. The world had moved from a century-long war to a complex peace, a peace that recognized disagreements and power struggles as a part of life, yet had the tools and the determination to handle them without resorting to violence. It was a hard-won peace, requiring constant effort and vigilance, but it was a peace nonetheless, a testament to the resilience and evolution of humanity. In this world of complex peace, technology had been the backbone of progress. Yet, as the years wore on, technology also became a source of contention. The United States, the Eurasian Collective, and the Pan-African Alliance were all racing to advance their own tech sectors. As they pushed the boundaries of what was technologically possible, they also entered a new, uncharted territory. In 2037, the Eurasian Collective announced the creation of an artificial intelligence, known as Aegis, capable of strategic planning, resource management, and complex problem-solving at a level beyond human capability. The announcement was met with a mix of awe, fear, and apprehension from the international community. While the Eurasian Collective assured the world that Aegis was designed with the utmost safety measures and ethical considerations, its existence was seen as a potential threat by both the United States and the Pan-African Alliance. They feared that this AI could tip the balance of power, even potentially control or disrupt global systems if it fell into the wrong hands or malfunctioned. Emily Foster, now President of the United States, reached out to Ivan, demanding transparency and an international oversight committee for Aegis. She argued that such a powerful entity should not be controlled by one nation alone. On the African continent, Nia Kiprito echoed these sentiments, asserting that the future of AI technology must be decided collaboratively. Karl, given his background in technology and weapons, was called upon as an impartial expert. He was invited to examine Aegis, to evaluate its capabilities, and to assess any potential threats. Meanwhile, Adele became a vital link in this new world drama, her network pulsing with messages, requests, and demands from every corner of the globe. In Eurasia, Ivan faced a dilemma. He understood the global concerns, but he was also aware that sharing control of Aegis could compromise the Eurasian Collective's security and sovereignty. Nevertheless, he agreed to allow Karl to inspect Aegis, hoping that this transparency would alleviate some of the international fears. Carl's inspection of Aegis was thorough. He was amazed by the AI's capabilities but also recognized the potential dangers. His report suggested that while Aegis was a technological marvel, it also represented a significant shift in global power dynamics. He recommended stringent international regulations, shared oversight, and a joint ethical framework to guide the future development of such technologies. Ivan's decision following the report was anxiously awaited. Eventually, in a surprising move, he agreed to the formation of an international AI ethics and oversight committee. The committee was to include representatives from all major world powers, ensuring that the control and future development of powerful AIs like Aegis were a collective decision. This decision was met with relief, but it was also the beginning of a new era of challenges. The world was now dealing with a technology that could potentially outthink them. The drama was far from over. But as before, the world faced this challenge not with guns and bombs, but with words, negotiation, and cooperation. The story of humanity's unending struggle for power, peace, and progress continued, each day writing a new chapter in the annals of their history. The path was never smooth, the peace never perfect, but they continued to move forward, guided by the lessons of their past, and the hope of a better, peaceful future. In the wake of the Aegis incident, global attention had turned towards the ethics and control of advanced technologies. However, beneath this shared concern, old tensions and rivalries continued to simmer. Over time, these simmering tensions began to escalate, setting the stage for a series of events that would threaten the world's hard-earned peace once again. It began with a resource dispute between the Pan-African Alliance and the Eurasian Collective. A large deposit of a newly discovered, highly efficient energy source, dubbed neotherium, was found straddling their territories. Both factions laid claim to the deposit, and negotiations quickly turned sour. While the world was engrossed in the unfolding neotherium dispute, another drama was slowly brewing in the background. In the heart of Europe, a charismatic leader, Viktor Braun, rose to power. He championed a doctrine of European exceptionalism, arguing that the European nations within the Eurasian Collective were being sidelined by the Asian nations. As Braun's influence grew, he started advocating for a separate European alliance, a move that threatened to split the Eurasian Collective. Emily Foster, watching these events unfold, grew increasingly alarmed. She feared that the combination of the neotherium dispute and the potential fracturing of the Eurasian Collective could push the world into another global conflict. Carl, now a respected voice in international affairs, was called upon to mediate the neotherium dispute. At the same time, Adele, whose network had evolved into a global peacekeeping force, began working tirelessly to prevent the schism in the Eurasian Collective. Meanwhile, in Eurasia, Ivan was fighting a battle on two fronts. He was negotiating with Nia over the neotherium deposit while also trying to maintain unity within his own collective in the face of Braun's growing influence. Despite their efforts, the situation continued to deteriorate. The neotherium dispute escalated to the point where both the PA and the Eurasian Collective began mobilizing their forces along their shared border. In Europe, Braun's campaign led to several countries threatening to secede from the collective. The world teetered on the edge of a precipice. The peace they had worked so hard for was under threat. The echoes of the past reverberated ominously, the specter of another global war looming on the horizon. Yet, the world had changed since the days of the Great War. They had learned the cost of conflict, and they had systems and institutions in place to manage disputes. Emily, Ivan, Nia, Carl, Adele, and many others around the globe began working more determinedly to de-escalate the situation. The specter of war hung over them, but they were resolved to prevent history from repeating itself. The outcome of their efforts, however, remained uncertain. While a Second World War had not officially broken out, these series of events led to a period of intense international tension, reminiscent of the Cold War period of the 20th century. Nations aligned and realigned, alliances were formed and broken, and the world held its breath, hoping that the lessons of the past would prevent another descent into global conflict. The fight for peace was far from over. The world remained locked in a period of tension and uncertainty. The situation was further exacerbated when an incident occurred at the contested neotherium mine, leading to the deaths of several Eurasian and Pan-African miners. An investigation was launched to uncover the details, but both sides blamed the other, and mutual suspicions reached a fever pitch. In Europe, Braun seized on the incident, using it as a rallying cry to gather more support. His rhetoric grew increasingly belligerent, and his movement became more than just a political faction within the Eurasian Collective, transforming into a militaristic force. The European Front, as they came to be known, began conducting military exercises and amassing resources, ostensibly for self-defense. Amelie, Yvonne, and Nia convened multiple emergency summits, trying desperately to de-escalate the situation. Despite their best efforts, there was a tangible shift in global sentiment. Countries started investing more in their military forces, and people around the world prepared themselves for the worst. In the United States, Amelie faced immense political pressure. Many within her own administration pushed for a stronger stance against the Eurasian Collective and the Pan-African Alliance, arguing that the US needed to defend its interests. Amelie, however, remained steadfast, advocating for diplomacy and cooperation over aggression. Karl's investigation into the neotherium mine incident pointed towards a possible sabotage by an unknown third party, suggesting that someone might be deliberately stoking the fires of conflict. This revelation brought a new urgency to the situation, but also a glimmer of hope. If the real perpetrators could be found, perhaps the escalating tensions could be halted. Adele found herself in a difficult position. Her network was strained to its limits, carrying sensitive information and facilitating covered meetings in an effort to uncover the truth behind the incident. At the same time, she had to navigate the increasingly intricate and dangerous maze of political alliances and enmities. Meanwhile, Yvonne faced a crisis within his own borders. The European Front's increasing aggression threatened to fracture the Eurasian Collective from within. He had to maintain the collective's unity while also dealing with the escalating neotherium dispute and the growing threat of war. Nia, on the other hand, stood firm. She bolstered the Pan-African Alliance's defenses while continuing to advocate for shared control of the neotherium deposit. She was aware that the Alliance's actions could be seen as preparation for war, but she believed she had no choice but to ensure her people's safety. As months turned into years, the world found itself stuck in a daunting stalemate. It was a time of anticipation, a slow-burning fuse against a powder keg. The lessons of the past, the memories of the Great War, hung heavily over the world, a grim reminder of the cost of failure. Yet, the hope for peace persevered. Though the shadows of a Second World War loomed ominously close, the global community continued its effort to pull back from the brink, seeking to resolve their differences through dialogue and investigation, rather than force. Just when the tensions seemed to be at their peak, an event occurred that finally pushed the world over the edge. The American embassy in the Eurasian Collective was bombed, resulting in several casualties. The evidence pointed to the European Front, but Braun vehemently denied involvement, shifting the blame onto the Pan-African Alliance. This was the spark that lit the powder keg. Despite Amelie's pleas for calm and restraint, the U.S. Congress voted in favor of a military response against the European Front. The Eurasian Collective, already frayed by internal conflict, officially split, as the European Front declared its sovereignty, severing ties with Ivan's leadership. Yvonne, in turn, denounced Braun and the European Front, aligning himself with the United States and the Pan-African Alliance. The Pan-African Alliance, viewing the U.S. and Eurasian Collective's military mobilization as a potential threat, declared its neutrality but increased its defense preparations. Meanwhile, Braun, emboldened by the chaos, started aggressively expanding the European Front's influence, occupying several smaller European countries under the guise of protection. Thus, what had started as a diplomatic crisis over resources had escalated into a full-blown global conflict. But this was not a repeat of the Great War. This was a new, different kind of war, a war born out of the ashes of an unresolved past, yet shaped by the progress and the mistakes of the century that had passed. While military confrontations occurred, much of this Second World War was fought in the shadows and through networks, waged not only with guns and bombs, but with information, technology, and diplomacy. Adele's network became a crucial battleground, as each faction attempted to gain an edge through espionage and information warfare. Karl found himself in the center of this storm, advising on defensive strategies, providing technological expertise, and aiding in the ongoing investigation into the initial sabotage at the neotherium mine. His work offered a glimpse of hope, as evidence began to suggest a rogue faction intent on pushing the world into chaos. Emily, Yvonne, and Nia, despite being swept up in the wave of war, remained in constant communication. They attempted to manage the conflict, to prevent it from spiraling out of control, even as they prepared their nations for the worst. It was a delicate balancing act, one they navigated with the knowledge of the Great War heavy in their minds. Despite the outbreak of war, there was a conscious effort to limit civilian casualties, to prevent the wide-scale destruction that marked the previous war. Battles were targeted, focused more on disabling infrastructure and cutting off resources rather than total annihilation. It was a chilling testament to the world's growth and the lessons learned from its history. Even in war, they sought to maintain a semblance of humanity. The world had once again descended into a global conflict, the very scenario they had hoped to avoid. Yet even amidst this Second World War, efforts continued to uncover the truth behind the incidents that had triggered the conflict, to find a way to end the war before it could reach the catastrophic levels of the past. The war had begun, but the fight for peace was far from over. The Second World War raged on. On the surface, it was a war of machines and strategies, but underneath, it was a war of ideologies and information. The planet was gripped in the throes of a struggle not just for territory or resources, but for the very future of global society. In the United States, President Emily Foster held her nation together with a steadfast hand. She balanced the demands of warfare with the need to maintain morale and hope. Schools, factories, and offices continued to function, even as they contributed to the war effort. America was a nation at war, but it was also a nation that refused to lose its identity to the conflict. Meanwhile, in the Pan-African Alliance, Nia Kiprito was playing a challenging game. The alliance had declared neutrality but was drawn into the conflict more and more each day. On one hand, she had to protect her people and resources from being exploited by the warring factions. On the other, she couldn't ignore the atrocities being committed, especially by the increasingly aggressive European front. This tightrope walk was a testament to Nia's leadership and the resilience of the alliance's people. The Eurasian Collective, under Ivan's guidance, faced its own set of challenges. The split with the European front had caused significant internal strife. Yet, Ivan worked tirelessly to keep the collective stable and united. His efforts to protect his people and the remaining territories from Braun's aggressive expansion strategies made him a beacon of hope for many in these dark times. In the heart of the war, Karl found himself working relentlessly to uncover the truth behind the bombing and the neotherium mine incident. His team discovered that the sabotage and the bombing were linked, the actions of a rogue faction operating within the shadows. Karl named this faction the Catalyst, a group apparently determined to disrupt global peace and provoke war for reasons still unknown. Meanwhile, Adele's global information network had become an essential tool for all sides. Information flowed in torrents, shaping strategies and influencing outcomes. However, it also became a target. The Catalyst attempted several incursions into the network, seeking to manipulate the information flow and further escalate the conflict. Amid the chaos, a significant event occurred. Braun's European front launched an unprovoked attack on a neutral smaller nation, causing an international outcry. The wanton disregard for neutrality and the resulting civilian casualties shocked the world and hardened global resolve against Braun. Emily, Yvonne, and Nia, along with leaders from other neutral nations, convened an emergency international summit. They drafted a resolution to unify their efforts against Braun's aggression, marking the first significant collective action since the war had begun. As the world fought back against the brutality of the European front, the people held on to a glimmer of hope. Even as cities were shaken by conflict, even as families were torn apart by war, they held on. They held on to the hope that their leaders would navigate them out of this dark period, that their world would learn from its past. They held on to the hope of peace, as the war raged on around them. The next phase of the Second World War saw the tables turn. The united front against Braun's European front pushed back forcefully. The tide of war began to shift, as the global community stood against the aggression, determined to uphold the principles of peace and neutrality. In the United States, Emily Foster organized a massive military operation. Named Operation Liberty, it was aimed at liberating the countries occupied by the European front. She rallied her allies, securing support from the Eurasian Collective and several other neutral nations, all united by a common goal. Ivan, dealing with internal strife and managing his own front against the European front, nevertheless committed a substantial force to Operation Liberty. It was a risky move, straining his already spread thin resources, but Ivan believed it was a necessary gamble. The Eurasian Collective, even in its fragmented state, would stand against tyranny. Meanwhile, Nia Kipruto made a momentous decision. The Pan-African Alliance would remain officially neutral, but it would provide covert support to Operation Liberty. Nia authorized resource allocation and allowed for strategic use of alliance territories, providing crucial support to the operation while maintaining a semblance of neutrality. On the technological front, Karl made significant progress. His investigation into the catalyst started bearing fruit. The group was found to be composed of rogue elements from various nations, all united by a desire to reshape the world through conflict. It was their actions that had led to the Neotherium dispute and the bombing of the US Embassy, both designed to escalate tensions and trigger war. Adele's information network was instrumental in uncovering these details. The network, stretched to its limits by the demands of the war, worked tirelessly to uncover and disseminate the truth. Adele herself was a constant presence, coordinating the flow of information, keeping the lines of communication open, and maintaining the integrity of the network against the Catalyst's continued attacks. As Operation Liberty commenced, the world watched with bated breath. The initiative saw success, with several occupied territories being liberated from Bronze forces. However, the European front resisted fiercely, leading to intense battles and significant casualties. As the war raged on, news of the Catalyst's involvement in triggering the conflict began to spread. The revelation shocked the global community, adding another layer of complexity to the already chaotic situation. However, it also fueled a renewed push for peace. If the war was started by a rogue faction, then it could be ended by the united actions of the global community. Even amidst the horrors of war, there was a silver lining. People from all walks of life, from every corner of the globe, were coming together. They were united in their resolve to fight not just against a common enemy, but for a common goal, peace. The world was at war, but it was also united like never before. The hope for an end to the conflict and a return to peace continued to shine brightly, a beacon guiding their path amidst the dark shadows of the Second World War. As the war entered its next phase, the global community continued to rally against Bronze European front. Operation Liberty made significant headway, liberating several occupied territories and providing a glimmer of hope to those living under Bronze oppressive regime. In the United States, Emily Foster worked tirelessly to coordinate efforts and maintain morale. She was a beacon of resolve, refusing to let the war efforts overshadow the values and freedoms her country held dear. Her leadership brought the nation together, providing a sense of unity in these times of turmoil. Across the ocean, Ivan was under immense pressure, not only dealing with Bronze aggression but also navigating the internal divisions within the Eurasian Collective. Yet, his determination never wavered. He put forth strategies that blunted Bronze advances, while simultaneously assisting Operation Liberty's efforts, proving the Collective's commitment to the cause. Nia Kipruto, leading the Pan-African Alliance, managed her position of neutrality with great skill. The alliance provided covert support to Operation Liberty and protected its territories from exploitation, demonstrating its resilience and resourcefulness. Nia's leadership was an embodiment of the alliance's spirit, a testament to the power of unity and cooperation. Karl's investigation into the Catalyst made further progress. He identified key operatives within the faction, unearthing a web of deceit that spanned across nations and institutions. His findings indicated a deep-seated corruption within certain sectors of global governance, fueling the flames of war for personal gain. With these revelations, Adele's information network became even more vital. She tirelessly protected the network against repeated attacks by the Catalyst, while ensuring the free flow of critical information. Amid the shadows of deception and manipulation, the network emerged as a beacon of truth and transparency. The war, despite its horrors, saw moments of extraordinary courage and humanity. Stories circulated about soldiers from opposing sides helping each other, civilians risking their lives to save others, and communities coming together to support each other. It was a grim reminder that the world was not simply divided into factions and territories, but was a shared home for all. But the war was far from over. Braun, cornered and facing global opposition, turned desperate. He launched an all-out offensive against the Eurasian Collective, aiming to capture key territories and resources. His forces fought with ruthless aggression, escalating the violence and resulting in devastating losses. In response, Amelie, Yvonne, and Nia, along with their allies, mounted a counter-offensive. Codenamed Operation Unity, it aimed to thwart Braun's offensive and bring the European front to its knees. The stage was set for a decisive confrontation, a battle that could potentially end the war or plunge the world deeper into chaos. As the world braced for this pivotal clash, the hope for peace remained alive. People clung to the belief that their leaders would guide them through this storm, that they could thwart the catalyst of this conflict, and that they could restore the peace that was stolen from them. This hope was not just a wishful thought but a collective force, a beacon that shone brightly even in the darkest corners of war. Operation Unity launched with a determined ferocity, the united forces of the global community bearing down on Braun's European front. It was a battle like none other, fought on land, sea, air, and in the realm of information. Adel's network served as the nerve center, disseminating vital intelligence and coordinating efforts across different fronts. The Eurasian Collective bore the brunt of Braun's assault, its cities and people under constant attack. But Ivan's leadership shone in these challenging times, his tactical strategies successfully holding back Braun's forces while minimizing civilian casualties. Emily Foster, from across the Atlantic, directed the American forces in coordination with Ivan's strategies. Her speeches echoed in every American household, her words of perseverance and hope serving as a rallying cry for her nation. The Pan-African Alliance, under Nia Kiprido's careful stewardship, provided critical support to Operation Unity, maintaining its neutrality while enabling a swift and effective counter-offensive. Meanwhile, Karl made significant breakthroughs in his investigation of the catalyst. He uncovered evidence of their plan to launch a final devastating attack designed to prolong the war indefinitely. This information, relayed through Adel's network, resulted in a global effort to neutralize the catalyst before they could enact their plan. The battle raged on, days blurring into weeks. The tide began to turn, Braun's forces were driven back, and territory after territory was liberated. Despite the devastation, there were moments of triumph, of unity, of humanity that kept the flame of hope alive. Then, finally, a breakthrough. A combined operation led by the US and the Eurasian Collective managed to penetrate deep into the heart of Braun's stronghold. In a decisive confrontation, Braun was captured, and the command structure of the European front was effectively dismantled. Simultaneously, a covert operation succeeded in thwarting the Catalyst's plan for a final devastating attack, capturing several key members of the faction. The revelation of their identities sent shockwaves through the global community, but it also marked the beginning of a comprehensive cleanup of the corruption they had fostered. The announcement of Braun's capture and the thwarting of the Catalyst's plot resonated across the world. As news spread, celebrations broke out in liberated cities, while quiet relief washed over those who had been anxiously waiting for the conflict to end. The leaders of the world, Amelie, Yvonne, Nia, and others, made a joint declaration marking the end of the Second World War. The world was wounded, its people and resources stretched thin, but the collective sigh of relief was nearly palpable. There was a long road of healing and rebuilding ahead, but the end of the war marked a new beginning. Amidst the ruins, there was a renewed commitment to unity, transparency, and peace. The lessons learned from the perpetual First World War and the devastating Second World War were etched deep into the collective memory of humanity, serving as a reminder of the cost of conflict and the priceless value of peace. The Second World War had ended, but its legacy would shape the world for generations to come. The leaders stood united, promising to rebuild a world that honored the principles of peace and cooperation. The people, though scarred by war, were ready to work towards a future defined not by conflict, but by unity and understanding. In the aftermath of the war, the world began its process of healing and reconstruction. The challenges were immense, economies were in shambles, societies were fragmented, and the physical devastation was beyond measure. But the spirit of humanity proved resilient, and the will to rebuild was stronger than ever. In the United States, President Emily Foster launched a comprehensive plan for post-war recovery. Economic reforms, infrastructure rebuilding, and societal rehabilitation were the pillars of this plan. She also took steps to strengthen international relations and proposed the creation of a new international body to maintain global peace and cooperation. Yvonne, having successfully navigated the Eurasian Collective through the war, focused on healing the internal divisions that had been exacerbated during the conflict. Efforts were made to foster cultural understanding and national unity, while the rebuilding of cities and infrastructures was undertaken on a war footing. The collective also played a crucial role in providing aid to the regions ravaged by Bronze forces. Nia Kiprito led the Pan-African Alliance through a unique post-war period. While the alliance was less physically scarred by the war, it faced economic and political challenges. Nia implemented policies that would ensure sustainable growth while preserving the neutrality and unity of the alliance. She also proposed an international initiative for technological and knowledge sharing to bridge global inequalities exacerbated by the war. Karl, after the successful neutralization of the Catalyst, dedicated his resources to global justice. His investigative team worked in collaboration with international agencies to hold those responsible for war crimes accountable. They also supported the establishment of systems to prevent the resurgence of similar rogue factions. Adele's information network evolved into a global platform for post-war communication and coordination. From facilitating aid distribution to broadcasting stories of resilience and hope, the network became a cornerstone of the world's healing process. The war had left deep scars, but it also sparked a worldwide renaissance. Societies were re-evaluating their priorities, economies were shifting towards more sustainable models, and nations were embracing cooperation over confrontation. The world was slowly coming together, its divisions healing and giving way to a collective identity. The process was long and arduous, but each day marked a step towards recovery, a step towards a world united in peace. The memories of the war served as a sobering reminder of the paths not to be taken, while the hope for a peaceful future was a guiding light, leading the way forward. As years passed, the world changed. Cities were rebuilt, societies mended, and economies recovered. But the most significant change was in the collective consciousness of humanity. The world had learned from its past and was determined to forge a future built on peace, unity, and understanding. The endless war had finally ended, and a new era had begun, an era defined not by conflict, but by cooperation and shared progress. As this era of cooperation and shared progress blossomed, it brought about remarkable changes. Nations collaborated on global challenges, scientific breakthroughs were shared openly, and cultural exchanges became common, knitting the world closer together. In the United States, President Emily Foster's comprehensive recovery plan yielded impressive results. Cities were revitalized, infrastructure improved, and the economy bounced back. But her most notable achievement was the establishment of an international organization dedicated to maintaining global peace and cooperation. This new body, known as the Global Unity Council, GUC, served as a platform for nations to collaboratively address global issues and disputes. The Eurasian Collective, under Ivan's leadership, emerged stronger and more unified from the challenges of the post-war period. Cultural exchanges and education reforms promoted national unity, and the economy stabilized. Yvonne played a significant role in the GUC, advocating for policies that promoted global equality and sustainable growth. Nia Kiprito led the Pan-African Alliance into a new era of prosperity and stability. The alliance's economy thrived, and technological advancements, bolstered by the International Knowledge Sharing Initiative, revolutionized industries across the continent. Nia, like her counterparts, was a prominent figure in the GUC, promoting initiatives that addressed global inequalities and climate change. Karl, having seen justice served to the Catalyst members and their allies, focused his efforts on international law enforcement and transparency. He developed a global security network that worked in close cooperation with the GUC, ensuring that rogue factions like the Catalyst could never again push the world towards conflict. Adele's information network expanded, becoming an integral part of the global communication infrastructure. It served as a source of unbiased news, a platform for cultural exchange, and a tool for coordinating international efforts. The world was transforming. The horrors of the wars were relegated to history, serving as a reminder of the devastation that unchecked aggression and conflict could cause. In its place, a new world was taking shape, one defined by cooperation, shared prosperity, and unity. In this new world, global festivals were celebrated with fervor, scientific breakthroughs were celebrated, achievements for all of humanity, and respect for cultural diversity became a universal value. The stories of the wars, of Braun, Emily, Yvonne, Nia, Carl, and Adele, were told and retold, serving as lessons for future generations about the cost of war and the value of peace. It wasn't a perfect world, disagreements occurred, inequalities existed, and challenges emerged. But the way the world addressed these issues had changed. Dialogue replaced conflict, cooperation overcame confrontation, and empathy trumped hostility. The era of endless war had given way to an era of unity and shared progress. The world had learned a harsh lesson, and it was determined not to forget it. In this determination, there was hope, a hope that this era of peace and cooperation would not just endure, but flourish. As the world moved forward, this hope was its guiding light, illuminating the path towards a future of shared prosperity and enduring peace. This era of unity and shared progress heralded unprecedented advancements. Technology, guided by the principles of sustainability and accessibility, made leaps that were once considered the stuff of science fiction. Breakthroughs in renewable energy and resource management helped nations reduce their environmental impact while maintaining their growth trajectories. Medical advancements brought about significant improvements in global health standards, with treatments becoming accessible and affordable to all. The world was transforming, and the pace of this change was breathtaking. Emily Foster, having served 2 successful terms as President of the United States, decided not to seek re-election. She took on a new role as a global statesperson and focused her energy on the GUC. Her work, along with Yvonne, Nia, and other global leaders, brought about significant reforms in the Council, making it more inclusive and effective. In the Eurasian Collective, Yvonne, too, transitioned from national politics to a global role. He established a global cultural exchange initiative under the GUC, promoting mutual understanding and respect among the diverse cultures of the world. His efforts not only strengthened international ties but also fostered global unity. Nia Kiprito, after her successful term as the leader of the Pan-African Alliance, spearheaded an international project addressing climate change. This initiative, backed by the GUC, brought together scientists, policymakers, and environmental activists from across the globe. Their efforts resulted in actionable strategies to mitigate climate change and foster environmental sustainability. Carl's Global Security Network evolved into an essential pillar of international law enforcement. Collaborating closely with nations and international bodies, the network effectively deterred potential conflicts and maintained global security. Its success was a testament to the world's commitment to peace and justice. Adele's information network, having grown into a global institution, remained committed to its founding principles of unbiased reporting and open information. It served as the world's primary source of news, facilitated international communication, and played a key role in the coordination of global initiatives. Humanity, having once stood on the brink of endless conflict, now stood united. The memories of the wars were now history lessons, tales of a past world that had learned from its mistakes. The new world was a testament to this learning. It was a world built on cooperation, shared prosperity, and unity. As this era unfolded, humanity began exploring the cosmos, no longer bound by the conflicts that had kept it tethered to Earth. It expanded its horizons, reaching for the stars, embarking on a new chapter of exploration and discovery. The spirit of unity that had defined this era on Earth was now taken to the stars, as nations joined hands in their cosmic endeavors. This was the world that emerged from the era of endless war, a world united, a world at peace, a world reaching for the stars. It was a testament to the indomitable spirit of humanity, a testament to its ability to learn, to change, and to aspire for better. The wars had ended, and in their place, a new story was being written, a story of unity, peace, and shared progress. This story was still being written, its next chapters filled with possibilities, waiting to be explored. Over time, the world had undergone a metamorphosis of monumental proportions. The era of endless conflict was a memory, buried deep beneath an era marked by peace, unity, and shared progress. This world was a testament to humanity's capacity for change and its indomitable spirit. It had weathered the storms of conflict, learned from its past, and forged a future that was fundamentally different. Emily Foster, Yvonne, Nia Kiprito, Carl, and Adele, having played their parts in shaping this world, gradually stepped back from their roles, passing the torch to a new generation of leaders. Leaders who had grown up in a world at peace, who were driven not by the fear of conflict but by the aspiration for shared prosperity and unity. Space missions, once a symbol of national prowess, became a collective endeavor. Humanity ventured into the cosmos, not as separate nations but as one united entity. The spirit of cooperation and unity that had defined the post-war era on Earth was now carried to the stars. Back on Earth, the cities that had once been marred by the scars of war now stood as symbols of resilience and innovation. Education, healthcare, and access to resources were considered fundamental rights, and cultural diversity was celebrated and respected. Environmental sustainability was no longer an afterthought but an integral part of all developmental plans. The world had changed in ways that were hard to imagine during the dark days of war. The Global Unity Council, born out of the ashes of war, stood as an emblem of international cooperation. Nations came together to solve global problems, setting aside their differences for the greater good. The world had learned the hard way that cooperation and understanding were the keys to a prosperous future. As humanity journeyed towards the stars, they carried with them the lessons of their past. They knew the price of conflict and the value of peace. They knew that unity was not just an ideal, but a necessity for survival. They understood that their diversity was not a weakness, but their greatest strength. In this era of peace, unity, and shared progress, humanity found its true potential. It was a testament to their resilience, to their capacity for change, and to their indomitable spirit. The era of endless war was a distant memory, a lesson from the past. But the future was a story of hope, unity, and shared progress. It was a story of a world that had learned from its past, a world that had chosen a different path. And so, the world moved forward, carrying the lessons of its past, guided by the hope for a better future. The story of endless war ended, and in its place, a new story was written. A story of unity, peace, and shared progress. A story that was a testament to the indomitable spirit of humanity. A story that ended not with a period, but with a comma, signaling the continuation of a journey towards a future filled with promise and potential. And in that journey, every person had a role to play, every person had a story to contribute. For this was not just the story of a few, but the story of all, a story of humanity itself.